Good morning.
Good morning.
Today is Sunday, February 16th, 2000. Sorry, it's a little close.
No.
2025. No, let's move back. Okay, let's start, as we always do, by saying we set our intentions and make aspirations by saying the four immeasurables prayer. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings not be separated from the happiness that has never known suffering. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment, anger, and aversion. All right, so I'm going to read something. This is our teacher, Garchen Rinpoche. This is a quote from him. When others blame you, they cannot add a fault to you that you do not possess. When others praise you, you are not becoming a greater person because of that. Whatever others say about you does not affect your faults or good qualities. Only you can see whether you have this fault or not. If you do not have the fault for which you have been accused, there is no need to be upset, since criticism does not make you have the fault. If you do have the fault for which you have been accused, the person pointing it out to you becomes your kind teacher, helping you to improve. Look honestly at your own faults, not at others. This is the way to improve. So, when we talk about one of the aspects of the meditation that we practice in this class is having to be really brutally honest with yourself. And that means, seeing your faults, seeing the afflictive emotions that arise, the ones that we work with and try to overcome, and the ones that we sometimes welcome and justify and cultivate even. And through the teachings, the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha and our lamas, like Garchen Rinpoche and others, we can start to discern what is an afflictive emotion. What is this doing to me? What can I do to work with it? Why should I work with it? But it takes a certain degree of honesty, like brutal honesty, with yourself, especially when you're talking about something like, if you do have the fault for which you've been accused, the person pointing it out to you becomes your kind teacher, helping you to improve. Not an easy thing, because it takes disarming the ego, which we don't often like to do. Looking really being able to look honestly at your faults and your positive qualities and things like that allows you to have the space to start to be able to work with them. Most of us have gone our whole lives, and maybe many lives, giving free rein to these afflictive emotions, to these faults. We can really, like a skilled lawyer, find ways and reasons why it's these afflictive emotions and these faults and tendencies are justified or necessary or important. Working with the mind, through the teachings, through the Dharma, and through meditation, can begin to open up some space where you can work on these things, where you can start to discern what's what and why it's necessary to work with them, why it's necessary to kind of begin to avoid the entitlement, because often it's that the entitlement to be possessed by afflictive emotions and to unleash them on other people. Victoria is going to speak for a little bit, and then we're going to sit. Today we're not going to do any review because we've been doing quite a bit of it. So if this is your first class, just listen for a bit and then, muddle through maybe the sitting part. But you can go to Michael Imperioli Meditation 101 on YouTube. And the first class of this year, which is January, early January this year, there's a detailed review of the techniques that we use, but we don't do it every week because most of you are repeat offenders. So just bear with us, and those of you who know it will, get through it. We're going to have questions, of course. It's also not doing a full review leaves us a little bit more time for questions. So there's a Q&A button on the Zoom toolbar, so you can ask questions about anything we talk about or anything, regarding the practices, and if we have something to say about them, we will.
You will probably say that I've spoken about this time and time again, and today will be, more of the same. But it's something very brutally important for us to really understand what mind poisons are afflictive emotions. And today I just took almost verbatim some of the teaching from Ringu Tulku Rinpoche, teaching on 3 poisons. I just sent it to Nick. Maybe we can post it for everyone to see. It's a very short teaching on YouTube. And Ringu Tulku Rinpoche is an incredible teacher. And also I highly recommend his teaching on emptiness. There's such a beautiful and elegant simplicity in the way that he describes it, in terms of interdependence, rather than some kind of a vacuous, emptiness that we usually think of when we think of emptiness. In Buddhism, emptiness means something very, very different. In Buddhism, emptiness means a lack of self-inherent existence. And it's important for us to understand that's a very basic tenet for us to understand anything and everything. For example, if we have any chance of dealing with negative emotions, judgments, being swept away, the cataclysmic emotional kind of mental states, if we don't understand their empty nature, it is very difficult for us to let them go. So this teaching on emptiness is very, very good. But what I wanted to speak today about briefly was, again, the 3 minds poisons, as Ringu Tulku Rinpoche calls them. It's very poignant to call them mind's poisons, because when these emotional states of anger, attachment, and Ringu Tulku Rinpoche calls attachment envy, because it's all connected, desire to attachment that grows into envy, and of course ignorance, because ignorance is the substrate state for all negative emotions to arise, because, and I'll get to that in a minute. So when anger arises, when all of the negative 5 afflictive emotions arise, they all arise on the basis of ignorance, of that things are there and they make me do something. Things are real. That person is a horrible person and they make me do this and act with anger or hatred. The basic ignorance of this dualistic view of reality, of me on this side knowing objectively something out there, is the very, very thing, the very first thing that needs to be addressed, because This ignorance of believing that things are out there causing me to act in bad ways is the very cause and the basis of all the other delusional behaviors that cause tremendous suffering to ourselves and tremendous suffering to others. Take anger, hatred. The minute it arises in us, we feel nothing but suffering. We are burning with it. Last week I said, in Buddhism, it is said, anger is like, the metaphor for it is like drinking poison while hoping that the other person dies. That's what anger or hatred is. The thing that drives it, the basis of thinking that there is something objective out there that makes me do it, is that very kind of like cop out. Is the very excuse for behaving as we do destructively. While in a deluded way we think that we are destroying when we're screaming at someone or we're hitting someone or we're wishing them dead, whether we're doing silently or we're acting on it, it doesn't really matter. Acting out of this polluted mental state immediately sets us into this pollution that we experience as suffering. So please, the very first step, start to really use meditation to think of what is anger, where does it arise from? And this is where meditation is so pivotal, so important. You need the view of emptiness to know the empty nature of all these emotions. And you also need the meditation to examine what is the basis, how do these emotions arise. And when you really become a meditator and you sit and you can give it a moment before you act and are swept away by these feelings into this baby mind of saying, these things are objectively out there, they made me do it, he made me do it, he took my thing so I bashed him, she said the bad thing so I screamed, etc. All this kind of behaviors. Sit and have like the space of meditation to understand that negative emotions are nothing other than our mind. These qualities arise with our mind. This whole blame thing, I am angry because I know, but these are all the baby states that create all and every kind of distinct and individual kind of suffering, and all of the suffering is based on this belief that there are objective realities out there that make us do bad things. Rule number one, know that all mental states, especially afflictive mental states, arise as a result of our ignorance. This notion of me and the other, he took away my thing, he said bad word, etc., like the quote that Michael just used of Garchen Rinpoche. Actually, whatever others do, it doesn't really, shouldn't influence our own mind. People can act badly. People can also have mental illness. People can be under, influence of drugs and rage and other kinds of, and by mental illness, I also mean the things we experience ourselves, like states of hatred and anger, wishing someone to die. Is that not a mental illness? Desire that makes me want to go and steal and want somebody else. I want to bring harm to someone else so I can have what they have. Are those not states of mental illness? So, thing number one is to really understand the view, the empty nature of things that arise, and cease. That's our thoughts and emotions. Also knowing that no matter what our mental state is, it's temporary and it arises and it falls. Experience that. That's where we need meditation. We need to stay with meditation to experience these mental states, also to see them dissolve, by also cultivating specific techniques to master and to tame our mind. Meditation is A technique to make our mind pliable, flexible, spacious. And I'll get back to spacious. It's very, very important. The space of our awareness is a decisive factor, whether we can deal with negative emotions or be swept away by them. But, pliable, flexible, and spacious, this is what we call in Buddhism taming the mind. When we open up the space, when we're not just in this tight space of ignorance of this baby mind, he did this to me, she took this from me, he said this to me, they did that to me, when we open that little tight space of suffering where it's me and what somebody does to me, it's all about me, and them are like this opposing force that is all in this negative stance and aspect against me. When we relax the me and the them, and the mind becomes more spacious, we can allow the space. In that spacious mind, we can have people behave badly, even if it's kind of seems like it's directed toward us. But if there is no me, nobody's acting against me. They're just acting badly, and that's where we just leave it at that. We also ease off on judgment, and we can see that a person acting badly is acting in the midst and in the moment of being swept away by a negative emotion for which they had no power. They couldn't counter it. And so they're like engulfed into this negativity because they have no power to act clearly or, understand that what they're causing, the suffering to themselves and to others. We need to have that clarity. We need to meditate enough to understand that this immediacy where we feel like things are out there hurting us and then we are completely justified in hurting them back, we have to demolish this structure, because this structure is the basis of suffering for self and other. When we are swept away by our negative emotions, the suffering is all in here, and then that suffering affects everyone in our path. And by the way, it's very rare that we can only use that suffering to hurt the person we intend to hurt. We bring that suffering home. That suffering stays with us when we sleep. That suffering comes with us back to our dinner table and hurts our loved ones. That suffering comes back to us when we talk to our child. Most of us can't just drop the anger and the hatred just because we get into our front door and put our coat into the coat closet. No, that suffering stays with us, and we poison all the loved ones that we don't intend to poison, because when we have no power to let it go in that space when it first arises, we don't have very much power to let it go when we get home and we're surrounded by all of our loved ones. In fact, that once we allow being swept into that negativity, it's like a raging fire. If we don't put it out on the spot, the fire only becomes bigger. That fire follows us. It burns everything in our path, and we cannot delude ourselves into thinking that we left the fire with that person we intended to hurt, and that when we get home or we get to somewhere where we're meeting our loved ones, that fire is extinguished. On the contrary, let's not be that stupid, and let's not delude ourselves, and let's not pretend like we left the fire behind, like we put away a coat into the coat closet. So working on taming the mind, working on knowing, first, step number one, acknowledging that these mental states, the negative, the mind poisons, the 3 or the 5 mind poisons, are nothing but my mind. They arise together with my mind. What do they arise from? They arise on the delusional basis of thinking someone did something against me. The attachment to me is what makes us produce the 5 poisons. It is my ignorance of thinking me and mind is more precious than what's happening out there. Somebody can brush me in the subway against me. And because my attachment to the me is so strong, sometimes we can find ourselves obsessing about that person who unintentionally brushed against us in the subway or hit us with a bag or looked at us in a certain way. We can take that through the whole day. We can dream about it, and it could be with us at work or at school the next day. This attachment to me is what causes this. And sometimes that little karmic brush, it can like really poison our whole day, because the obsession, it's not because of what they do. It's the obsession with me. How dare they brush against me? How dare that person not, make more space for me on the train when I'm sitting? I'm important. This is what the cause of all the afflictive emotions is. So first, we start with the basis, knowing that the 5 poisons, the 3 poisons, arise on the basis of a delusional mind that's very attached to me. Have the intelligence to understand that when I have this as the basis of my mind, this attachment to me and myself, I'm important, they're not. How dare they brush against me? Maybe that person is coming from a funeral and their level of awareness has gone down tremendously a lot. Maybe that person is very poor and they have to take a subway on a very, very difficult day. We don't know. All we do is think about how dare they brush against me. I'm the important one. So, starting with that, understanding that we need to start with dissolving the me, the importance of me. Opening up the mind to make the space for them and letting them be. Let those things occur. I'm not saying like be a doormat, nobody said that, but allowing the spaciousness of things to occur and remain where they occur. That person is behaving badly under like the influence of a bad mind. Let them, send them compassion. Do not pour fuel on the fire. Training the mind means when we say to our mind, shut up, it shuts up. When we say to our mind, drop the obsession, it drops. If we say, remember and act out of virtuous place and on the basis of virtuous thoughts, it will do so. But we have to cultivate those states of mind. And that means giving up this me, I am right, I know what's right, my anger is righteous, my jealousy is righteous, I know, me, all this me stuff. And please also remember that any of those 5 poisons create suffering for oneself just as they create suffering for others. So at least having the intelligence to know that the minute one of those afflicted states of minds arises, we are in the closet with the pain, in that tiny little me space, with the door shut, feeling this, and usually this kind of, afflicted mind and the thoughts that go with that emotional state, with that energy of affliction, are very cyclical. We cannot drop them. Our best chance is to drop them right when they arise on the spot. Once we get engulfed into it and we're swept away by it, our chances are very little. It's like you go into the ocean. If you go a little bit further, the chances of swimming back are very much harder. So the minute you feel the wetness, at the feet, you feel like the emotion is there arising. I am together with a difficult person. Make the decision beforehand, before you go into the room, on how you're gonna act, how you're gonna keep your mind, how you're gonna keep your awareness, how you will not be swept away through the negativity, because you will be cultivating your own control, your freedom, your spaciousness, and you will be cultivating your happiness. It's very, very important. No love, no happiness. If we don't allow, and just kind of the space for people to act out what they need to act out with the mind of love, we have no chance for happiness, because we'll be triggered day and night, day and night, you know? If we don't switch our mind from this ignorant mind of me and my selfishness to the space of awareness. Remember, the mind, the dualistic mind, the conceptual mind of me and the stuff that arises, you know, they're like little waves in the ocean, right? And it's a tiny little, like, whatever, leaf on the surface of the ocean getting risen by those waves. Whereas when we expand and open our mind and we identify with the space of awareness, we identify with the ocean, not the little waves of coming and going. And so Ringu Tulku Rinpoche in this teaching gives specific remedies on what to do and not to do, remedies. And I pretty much wrote them verbatim, and I would like to repeat them. So, number one, stop reacting. See how much suffering you bring to yourself and to others. You know, become aware. 2, let it go. Let it subside by itself. Knowing the impermanent nature of emotions and thoughts which are attached to these emotions, because first there's like the anger that arises, and then comes the narrative. He's bad. I should do this. I should demolish him. I should, you know, drive over with my car over this person. They're so bad, you know. Let it subside. Just know this baby talk, this ignorance, is just fooling you, like Michael said. He's like the ego is like the lawyer for bad behavior. He'll find every reason why you should do criminal activity, but he's not going to tell you that you're hurting yourself and hurting all others together with you. So let it go, let it subside by yourself. Emotions and thoughts are very strong and overpowering, but they arise and they subside. Permit the space for them to subside. Don't put the fuel into negativity. Free yourself of mind's poison. Keep your mind clean, pristine. Keep your mind on the side of awareness. Do not easily be persuaded and jump over the cliff into emotions and feelings. They're not that important. Bring mindfulness and refocus your mind. Cultivate control and learn the art of contentment. Cultivate control, meaning mindfulness. We're not talking about suppressing emotions and feelings here. We're talking about mind. Seeing the situation for what it is. Knowing that these emotions are just my responses. My responses are connected to my ego. If I don't err on the side of the ego, I don't identify with my emotions. I can watch them like a movie. I can sit here with my awareness and its space and let it come and let it go. Remember, a lot of our emotions, most of our emotions, are just habitual patterns. Like when we say, I have a difficult mother, she does this and this, you know, and it's a cycle that never ends. I have a difficult parent, I have a difficult partner, I have a difficult boss. Meaning that we have never stepped out of this baby relationship of blame, right? But if we sit in the theater of awareness, we can let them, you know. We can also, out of the theater of awareness, when the negative emotion subsides, we will know the right thing to say. We will know the right thing to do. And we need to have that space. We need to act not out of the closet of this me and I'm angry crap. We need to act out of the spaciousness and the luminous wisdom energy of our mind. And the wisdom energy is always compassionate energy. That's why it permits for the space for that person to act out in whatever way they're acting out now, but without us being contaminated by them and not pouring fuel into the fire. This is what spaciousness, awareness is. Awareness is always very, very kind. It has enough space for everything. No matter what happens, we can experience it without being swept away and triggered, without reactivity. We can wait and we can choose the course of our words and actions, of our body, speech, and mind. Number 4 is understand. Understand that emotions are not anything other than our own mind, not separate from our own mind. They are like waves in the vast ocean of awareness. Learn not to follow emotions and act blindly on them. Emotions do subside if we watch the degree of our attachment diminish. Decide ahead of time not to be swept away. Decide not to be affected and overwhelmed. Decide to maintain awareness and not get swept away into this, And this is where meditation comes in. This is what meditation is for. Meditation is our ticket to freedom that leads to happiness, to the very thing that Michael started with, quote by Garchen Rinpoche. The others, when they blame you, they do not create faults. They may just experience happiness on pouncing on you, but they don't actually create faults unless you respond with a fault behavior and words and actions of a fault mind of ignorance and attachment, and you pounce back on them. Let them. And the same way, when people praise you, they don't add anything. Flattery should not sway our minds. We should stay in the equanimity of our awareness. We should be very, very clear, what space we want to occupy in our life, the space of awareness or this baby ego mind with this, all the faults and delusions. This is where meditation is key for us to get to know our mind. And then once we become more stable in knowing that, we bring that into all situations, that mind of stability, which is also really mind of contentment and happiness. It goes everywhere with us. People no longer influence us in the same way. Situations don't influence us in the same way. Impermanence doesn't influence us in the same way. And karmic things, when they arise, don't influence us in the same way. We allow for that in the spaciousness of awareness. Yes, of course, if I'm healthy today, doesn't mean I will be healthy all my life. So if I get an illness, I have a virus because I go on the subway and I'm there with, thousands of people, I don't go crazy and say, why did it happen to me? I take the illness, I wait for it to subside. We learn how to deal with obstacles in that way because, our life is that waves of impermanence. There will be good and there will be difficult. But, we have to disconnect from this good and bad calling things like that. What we need to do is connect more to letting things arise and letting them pass. Yes, difficulties may arise. There will be old age, sickness, and death, but we know that. So we have to make space for it and not fall apart when these things come. We will have difficult relationships right in our vicinity. They will usually be our closest people, like a parent or a child or a spouse. This too is a karmic thing, and we have to also let it be and make decisions based on clarity. So this is my big 5 cents. Please watch that teaching by Rinpoche Rinpoche, and please meditate.
Ringu, right?
Yes.
Tulku Rinpoche. Ringu.
Tulku Rinpoche.
Lots of good teachings on YouTube.
And watch that teaching on the 3 poisons.
3 poisons. Okay, let's sit. We'll get into our meditation posture. Sitting on the floor in a chair, hips in line or above the knees, cross-legged or seated, feet on the floor if you're seated, back straight, head slightly tilted, hands resting in the lap, however you like it. Eyes open, mouth closed, teeth slightly apart, tongue where the teeth, top teeth meet the roof of the mouth. Let me get the timer. Okay. And let's just do 3 breaths, focusing our attention where the breath moves in and out. The nostrils meet the upper lip there. Okay. when we become aware that we are thinking, we say to ourselves, back to the breath, focus our attention again where the breath goes in and out, or we see it, the thought arising like a cloud in the mind, which we visualize as this limitless, clear, placid, calm blue sky and a cloud. Once we're aware that it has arisen, once we're aware the thought has arisen, we watch it dissolve back into the sky, leaving no trace, leaving no mark, no blemish, and settle back into that calm, clarity, spaciousness. And repeat. Notice a thought has arisen, back to the breath. Watch the cloud dissolve. You shift your body. If you feel a lot of tension, you need to resettle. Settle back into the posture, back into the calm, back into the sky-like nature of your mind. Great. Nick, in the chat button, Nick, the last review session is a link, and the three poisons, Ringo Tulku teaching is a link as well. So we'll go to some questions. I was in conversation with a loved one yesterday. I was being given a compliment, and then there was an interruption. The person giving the compliment said, I all of a sudden was flat. I'm not sure what you mean by that. I never meant to be rude. I simply thought it was over. Is peace of understanding within simply an extension of knowing when to be not? Is peace simply an extension of understanding when to be not, like when to not? I mean, it comes from an understanding, and having some kind of equanimity and having some kind of a calm mind comes from understanding when you're not calm, when you're not kind of, peaceful, when you're not, your mind is not spacious. Because when you're under the influence of the afflictive emotions, the mind gets very tight and very small and very closed, really. The idea of closed-minded, open-minded it's not even really a metaphor if you think about it. I mean, the sensation and the feeling when you're, meditating, carries that with it. There's that, like when you're anxious, your breath gets shallow, your breath gets rapid, and things like that. There's definitely a feeling of being overwhelmed. It's physical as well as mental. So I'm not exactly quite sure. I think that's kind of what you're asking. Understanding what the mind is doing. That's part of what we're doing here. Part of it, and a lot of it is learning, through the teachings. What is an afflictive emotion? What's not an afflictive emotion? Where do they come from? Why are they there? What, and that's kind of dismantling a lot of our mechanisms, a lot of our habitual responses, reflexes, reactions to certain situations, and many of them are very repetitive. Victoria was saying, a lot of these emotions are, in direct relation, people close to us. That's where the most sticky ones, the most made powerful ones, the parents, the child, the spouse, the best friends, co-workers, people we see every day. A lot of these situations are repetitive and habitual, and roles, that we've accepted, that we've grown into, that, and usually where the stickiest, the most difficult, the ugliest, the hardest emotions, the ones that cause us the most pain and suffering, is exactly where we have to work.
I'd like to add, it doesn't really respond to your question. I wasn't sure exactly what you were asking, but just adding to what Michael said, if we have any hope of changing or not having these relationships in the next lifetime, if you think that today I have this difficult person, but next time I'll wake up in a different body and I won't have this, it's a delusion. So if we really want to have happiness in our life, we need to make changes in those very difficult relationships. Those difficult relationships are our karmic things we brought from the past lives or from current lives. We've created them. The difficult people, etc., arise on the basis of us responding and, being co-creators of those difficult relationships. So if we have any chance of changing our karma and, having it be less difficult, we really need to work on those difficult places. And it's not that they have to change, it's that we have to change. The emphasis here always is we're working on our mind. We're not pointing fingers and saying you're wrong and I'm right. That's the very cause and the basis of suffering for ourselves and for others.
Can you explain the difference between an emotion and a feeling?
They're the same, really. There might be slight fluctuations and differences, but and to me, an emotion is more of the energetic quality, whereas the feeling, feeling is a co-emergence of ideas, judgments, and sentiment that are really based on the emotion. Emotion is much more raw, and emotion fuels. Like if we can say that the emotion is the fuel, the feeling is more of like the car that takes us to a vehicle that takes us to a certain destination. A feeling is a fully formed thing that's based on that fuel, based on that emotion, where we justify doing the wrong thing, blaming the other person. That's a feeling. Feeling is much more conceptual in its nature, whereas emotion is like raw fuel. I'm angry, and then comes, I'm angry at you because blah, 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 and that's my feeling about you, It's how we become deluded and fool ourselves into creating a narrative that supports a certain emotion. But what we have to do is when the emotion arises, like the fuel, we turn on the ignition, the fuel arises, we have to turn off the ignition and work on the fuel. We have to know that that fuel should not be taking us anywhere, that the minute we step into that water, it'll take us to a horrendous place of suffering for ourselves and for others. And we don't even know the extent of the suffering because our minds are very finite. Conceptual mind is a tiny place. We don't know what we're creating. Certainly we know we're creating patterns that will repeat themselves over and over again. Every time we put the key into ignition and work on a certain kind of fuel, we could have the certainty that it'll become a repetitive point, a subconscious response where we will fall into it, almost immediately if we don't work on that very hard.
How do you see the distinction between mindfulness and meditation? I don't think there's a distinction. What we are practicing when we're sitting in meditation, to be able to recognize that the mind is engaged in a thought, subject and object, that kind of thing, takes mindfulness, right? Mindfulness takes that kind of quieting down of the body and the mind, opening up the space where we can see what's going on. I like to say mindfulness is being able to recognize what's going on, what's arisen within the mind, right? Regarding our own emotions, reactions, feelings, and things like that. Awareness can be what's going on outside, right? So when you're talking to someone that rather than just being lost in your own projections and thoughts and what you want to say, what you want to express, awareness is kind of like seeing what's going on with them, maybe being subtly attuned to what's going on with them, having awareness that, oh, wow, maybe I shouldn't be talking about this because something else is going on with this person, and maybe I should ask if they need to talk about something. Other people might not make that distinction. Sometimes I look at it like that. But both of those things, if you're using those definitions, mindfulness, what's going on here, awareness, what's going on out here, is a result of meditation meditation, centering the body, stilling the body, focusing on the breath, kind of bringing down the temperature, bringing down the speed, trying to create some space in the mind. I see a thought, I let it go. I recognize I'm thinking, I go back to the breath, opening up space. So it's not just this, you're not just reacting to external stimuli, to things that happened yesterday, to habitual thought patterns, all those kind of we're kind of slowing down so we could be in the moment really and see what's actually happening rather than what we're projecting that's happening, what we're carrying with us from this morning or carrying with us from 20 years ago. Settling all that down. And there's another question about how do I make this a daily practice? How can I begin to improve? You answered your own question. Is how do you make a daily practice? You do it every day. What we did here today, sitting for 10 minutes, you start to do that every day. It starts to become something that becomes very important to you. If any of this is important, you have to find, the space. It's not going to come from, taking a class, maybe agreeing with what the person's talking, what they're saying, agreeing with it, understanding it. Our culture is very much like, you read a book, you either agree with what they're saying and you don't agree, and kind of, we have this idea that if you're kind of agreeing to what the book is saying, that's now it's integrated into your system, which is not the case at all. I've been in that position many. It's what kind of brought me to Buddhism, because I would read a lot of books, self-help or spiritual books, philosophy and things like that. And I can agree with all and think it's smart and think it makes sense, but without practice, you're back to your, square one. Because our habitual patterns are so ingrained and so strong.
I also wanted to say, in the beginning, it's in the space of meditation. When we quiet down the thing, one of the great difficulties is that in our culture, we have just a few little terms for mind and mental events, right? For consciousness and stuff like that. Whereas in Sanskrit, and so therefore in Buddhism, because that's Buddha taught in that language, there are maybe over 50 terms for the different states of mind. So to be clear, what happens in meditation within the space of awareness, which is infinite, really, space of awareness. Conceptual mind takes place. This little closet of the conceptual mind that's based on me, ego, and the 5 afflictions. I like it, I don't like it, I hate it, etc. All this kinds of conceptual crap. The dualistic ego mind, it's 5 poisons. But it's like a chair in a room. The room is awareness, the chair is that conceptual mind. It's very difficult and vague. When we say mind, we can, attach to it all kinds of different significances. And in some of the Buddhist traditions, we call it ordinary mind. We call that space of awareness. So when we sit to meditation, the space of awareness opens, and that's where we observe the fluctuations of the dualistic mind. We watch it like a movie. We don't, get hijacked by, I hate this, I don't like this, or I need this, I gotta get up and run up and get this right now. We just observe the movements. We observe the fall, rising and falling of the dualistic mind, of the conceptual mind, because emotions are attached and feelings and judgments. That's all this. It's the chair in the room, whereas the room, the space, is awareness. So what happens is the bigger we open. So what I wanted to your very good question, the first question, that mindfulness is remembering to bring the space of awareness to the conceptual situation. Yes, of course, we're crossing the street, we're watching, green light, conceptual mind. I should walk now, conceptual mind. Let the cars not hit me, conceptual mind. But what happens the more we meditate, we can bring awareness, we can bring the space together with us. Normally, we're never aware of the space, right? We walk into the room, sofa, chair, TV, this, that. But with meditation, we become aware that, oh, all this stuff is in this space. And space is equanimous. It cannot be cut, it cannot be separated. Space inside the apartment, outside the apartment is the same. This is when we mindfulness is when we bring awareness into everything together with the dualistic mind, which we also need. It's a relative mind. We need it to function in the relative world of furniture and cars and green lights. But at the same time, as practitioners, what we bring is this. We bring this infinite field of luminosity, of awareness. That field never leaves us. There is no such thing as a human sentient being or any sentient being without that luminous field. We wake up, it's there. We go to sleep, it's there. In the deepest of sleep, in the blackout sleep, it's there. That's what it means to be a sentient being. So that's what mindfulness, if it clarifies it all, we bring that mindfulness, the spaciousness of the mind, into, along together with all the dualistic risings and fallings.
Recently divorced, I've chosen not to have any contact with the other person. We have adult children, but I want nothing more to do with him. I accept my part in the breakdown, and I have forgiven. Some people have told me I'm immature in ending all communications, but I consider it protecting my peace.
You do it for as long as you need to. In other words, until you have cultivated the strength of where, if you were in the circumstance of having the contact with the other person, that it would not bring about afflictions and negative emotions. You will know when you are ready, when you have that space where whatever they say and do will not affect your emotional and therefore mental state. When you're ready, you do it. And it doesn't matter what people say. You have to know, because you are so right. If you know that if currently you come into contact with that person and you will produce and will spark off negative emotions, negative speech, negative activity, it's better to stay away. Then when we have the strength, when we have quelled down this emotional fuel fire situation, the whole emotional depot has been brought under control, you may revisit that conversation and act differently, but you have to act out of a place of strength. It is very important to be honest and be truthful with ourselves and to know when we are ready, and even more important, when we are not ready. To know that is very important. In the 37 Bodhisattva practices, it is said very clearly, abandoning negative places, abandoning negative companions is a bodhisattva practice, because what we don't want is to be in situations and to be with people that will make us go backwards, into emotional spaces of destruction and negativity. It's like if you want to quit being an alcoholic right now, you're not going to associate with people who have drinking problems. You're not going to go to bars. That's dropping the negative companions and the places that are negative for us, because right now we don't have strength to withstand it. At one point, Michael and I were also, doing things, of that negative nature. But these days I can own a bar. I can go to a bar. I can be with people who drink. They bore the crap out of me, but I can be around them without falling into the affliction of negativity. So it's very, very important that you know when it is the right time for you to do it. Just be mindful of how it affects the whole situation, your children, etc., etc. And you can tell your children, I will do so when I am ready, when I will no longer fall into the same afflictive mental state. Because like I said, if you're trying to quit drinking and a week later you go to a bar, chances are you will fall right flat to the same, behavior. So being honest and knowing is such an important key. This honesty is everything, and of course, you know, stay always on the side of the mind where you're not going to be triggered, you're not going to be reactive, and you'll do it when you're ready. That's all.
When you relinquish the ego, do you relinquish the love you feel? Where is love kept if not the ego?
Well, ego is not never a place of love, because ego is all for me. It's like you're in a relationship, but when you're in a relationship from an egoistic point, it's always like, what is that person doing for me? What kind of gifts are they giving me? What kind of comfort are they giving me? It's always about me. Or the opposite, the slavishness. What do I do to keep them? Like out of the place of attachment. How do I keep them? How servile do I have to be for them to stay with me? How do I smother and mother and, whatever to keep them? So this is the ego place, the insecurity, the hopes and fears. Whereas when you can let the person be who they are without this what's in it for me crap is really when there is love. I mean, the love is not a love when it's conditioned by me and what's in it for me. So this is what it means to give up the ego, is also to know for the first time what love is. It's being able to be with the person without these bonds. And these bonds is what always kind of pollutes the relationship to begin with, because either we're behaving in a certain way, we're expecting the other to behave in a certain way, and everything is spinning like this crazy around these judgments and this narrow path that the ego creates. That's not love, that's pollution. It's dependence, it's attachment, it's anger when they don't perform in a certain way. That all has to do with ego. It's like, it's my hopes and fears, my expectations. I mean, where is the space for love and all of that? So, love can only really take place without ego, because love is when we are not conditioned by what they do. When we love someone, we love without expectation of a certain result, forcing them to behave in a certain way and calling that love. That's just pollution. It's not love. And by the way, very, very important thing that we need to address. When we say without ego, it means that we have awareness without this closet of me and mine. It doesn't mean we relinquish and abandon everything. It's actually the very first time that when we relinquish the ego, or we ease the ego, we don't act always through the lens of the ego, me and mine, what's in it for me crap. It's the very first time that we actually embrace everything and everyone, and things become precious, because it's not conditioned by me in this narrow gorge of what's in it for me stuff. It doesn't mean we walk away from everything and we just abandon everything. I mean, the strongest of us who are really ready for that kind of practice, when they can go into, solitary practices, but believe me, none of us are in that place. This is our teachers, they are those kinds of warriors that have ripened mentally to that place where they can go away so that they can return for the benefit of all sentient beings. We're nowhere there. We don't have to entertain those things. But, easing the ego, working with the ego, and going from the ego to the space of awareness, which is what we fight for so hard, and why we meditate, to bring the virtuous mind, to bring the space of awareness, rather than always function through this baby crap of, I'm right when I hit you, and, when I insult you, because I'm right and you're wrong crap of the ego, is the very, very first time that we actually embrace things. We don't abandon things when we are aware. We actually, is the first time when we let things be and we can love them, because things filtered through the ego are never about anything but this pollution and distortion.
There's several questions about people, like 3 people have wrote about friends or even family or others who have cheated them out of money for the most part, legal disputes and things like that.
You know, our teacher, Garchen Rinpoche, would say immediately on the spot, and absolutely without any doubt, I can say that, he will say it's karma. You know,
Right.
when we have illness, it's karma. When we get cheated, it's karma. What that means is in the previous life, we have done things that have produced these results in the present life. So it's going to take a lot of work to first to understand what karma is, to be accepting of it. And then more importantly, is to say, may that what they took benefit them rather than cause them suffering. Please do not fall into the trap of wishing them, acting from the ego and wishing them harm. When you do that, you create further circumstances for the same thing to happen, but even more violently, because now you have this theft, and then you're adding hatred to it. You know, so now you have this other perfect storm brewing. You know, you'll walk around with that kind of mind. You will always feel like you're cheated by everything and everyone. You will have no sleep, no peace. It's like the Christmas story with Scrooge. You remember that scene? You know, he and his partners with the chains that they carry. It's like living in constant and continuous state of fear and suffering. So please, if that did happen, please understand and acknowledge, like Rinpoche would say, karma. Karma's a bitch, but we create it. So if this happens, have the graciousness of saying, well, I guess whatever that was, a karmic debt is paid and I am free of it now. And please work on your mind as to not create further negative mental states, because if you will have freedom from creating polluted mental states, very good chances are you will regain all of that in very, very quick time. Whereas when you create and continue with negative mental states, I mean, more suffering. Nothing else can come of that.
Uh, we're going to close. If you still want to ask a question, there's a Gmail where you can communicate with us. What is it, Nick? Michael Imperioli Meditation 101 at Gmail. And we close, as we do every week, by saying a dedication prayer. We dedicate the merit from this class, whatever good karma, good energy we cultivate from gathering together and working on these things, whatever that merit that's generated, we dedicate that to the benefit of all sentient beings. By this merit may all beings attain the state of enlightenment and conquer the enemies of faults and delusions. May they be liberated from this ocean of samsara and its pounding waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death.
And thank you for being here. Thank you, Nick.
See you next week.